Think all the action on campus happens in the classroom? Think again. Deviance. It's a word that might make you think of wild parties or breaking the law, but really it's just any behavior that breaks a social norm. And guess what? It's everywhere, even on your college campus, from the student who always talks back to the professor to the one who shows up in PJs to a lecture. Deviance can be as loud as a protest or as quiet as a whisper. But here's a scenario for you. Someone asks for your ID and you hand it over without a second thought. Seems harmless, right? Well, not so fast. Imagine it's not a security officer, but just someone pretending to be one. Scary, huh? This simple act of compliance shows how easily we trust authority and how dangerous that can be if we don't ask questions. As we explore deeper into the sociology of deviance, we'll uncover how challenging social norms isn't just about being a rebel without a cause. It's about understanding why we follow rules and what happens when we don't. Stay tuned as we shine a light on how campus security and your awareness play crucial roles in maintaining a safe and vibrant college environment. Because being informed is just as important as being educated. Ready to question the norm? Let's get started.
As shown in the introduction video that we created, Lily and I conducted an elaborate act of deviance in hopes of gaining a broader understanding of the social norms and expectations that deviance holds, specifically around our college campus. After we found out the prompt for this, we brainstormed for a long time, but ultimately landed on the idea of asking students for their ID in a place that proof of identification was not normal, for example, a library rather than a bar. But unfortunately, the findings that we found throughout this act raised concern and opened our eyes to the true matter of conformity and social strain in our society, and specifically at Texas A&M University. We began our act by going to the library. That is where we wanted to do it. We ran into a few problems. Instead of standing at the front of the library, they asked that we did it somewhere else. So we chose the 4th floor of Evans Library, which is the most busy floor during the heat of the moment. So we decided to stand at the top of the stairs, letting people pass as they came up the elevator, but stopping everybody that came up the stairwell. We decided that we would have one partner, specifically Lily, stand at the top of the stairwell, asking those students for their ID. She said it in a very authoritative manner and kind of demanded asking for the IDs. We had the first girl come up the stairs. She asked for her ID and she very willingly showed her ID and then went along as she pleased. A next group came along. It was quite a few students, and we asked, and the majority of them presented their ID very willingly, but we did have one outlier of this sample that asked why we were asking for the IDs. After everybody had passed him and he realized that his question did not matter anymore, he purely conformed with everybody and showed his ID and walked away without any other questions. The same thing happened with a few other groups, minus the outlier. We only had one out of the entire sample. But no one questioned her authority. This is where the concern came in the matter. We found conformity throughout this act. We had several people come up. Maybe they were questioning in their brains. Maybe they weren't questioning whether they should ask who this is or who she is. But we had several people conform to whoever the leader was. And this is where the conformity and social strain comes into play here. Throughout our hypothesis, we suggested that the majority of people would probably conform because that's what we were always taught growing up is if there is an authority figure, you respect the fact that they have authority and you do not ask questions. So we suspected that most people would, and most people would be willing to show their ID. But we did suspect a few people, maybe with some stronger personalities, to question the authority that she held. She did not look like she was old enough to have authority. She was not acting as if she had a certain amount of authority, other than maybe the voice that she was acting in. So, of course, we hypothesized that we would have a few people ask as to why she was doing it or what authority she held. But in this case, we did not have that. We had the majority of people come in groups and conform with whoever started and willingly show their ID and then passed along throughout their day. This is when our concern comes in hand. If we were not somebody that was just doing a project and we were somebody that was wanting to use this in a malicious way, that is where it would become a problem. We were asking for people's ID, and if that was somebody with malintention, it could turn into something much worse in taking down information and using those things that should not be used. So, this is where the social strain theory and conformity really come in hand to our project.
Social strain and conformity. Conformity is the process of changing one's behavior to comply with social norms or expectations. Solomon Asch's 1951 experiment on group conformity demonstrated how individuals will obey perceived authority figures or social norms even though they suspect something unusual. This can be seen in class participation. Staying quiet in class because others aren't raising their hands even if you know the answer. This can be due to following the crowd. When students notice that their classmates rarely speak up in lectures or discussions, they may hold back, even when they have questions or ideas. This behavior stems from a desire not to stand out or disrupt the group norm, especially in large lecture halls where silence is the norm. This can also be due to fear of judgment. Many students avoid answering or asking questions because they fear being judged or saying something deemed as dumb or wrong. If the norm in a particular class or among certain peers is to stay quiet unless absolutely necessary, students will likely conform to that standard to avoid embarrassment or social scrutiny. This kind of conformity is closely related to normative social influence, where individuals adjust their behavior to gain approval or avoid disapproval from others. Over time, this can shape classroom dynamics where silence or active engagement becomes the social norm, not because it's right or wrong, but because it's what everyone else is doing. The principle of conformity can help us understand more about whether students comply with requests or outright question the legitimacy of what they're being asked. Since our Deviant Act took place in the library, which is normally seen as a place with structured rules, being asked to comply with a fake authoritative figure, even if it seems odd or out of place, the students will still comply. This also relates to the social strain theory, which is one of the most popular theories in sociology by Robert Merton. This explains how individuals respond to pressures to fulfill societal expectations. For college students, ritualism can be seen in those who attend every class, complete assignments on time, and strictly adhere to academic rules and routines. Yet no longer feeling motivated by the end goal of academic success, personal growth, or career achievement. These students may once have been passionate about their future, but over time have grown disillusioned due to burnout, overwhelming pressure, or a loss of faith in the value of a degree. Rather than dropping out or rebelling, they continue to go through the motion because it feels safer and more socially acceptable than giving up entirely. This passive form of conformity reflects how individuals may cling to the structure of college life not out of ambition or hope, but simply because they don't see a better alternative. Ritualism among students highlight a quiet kind of disengagement where the form of academic life is preserved but its meaning is lost. Since students were young, they are expected to follow authority in formal settings such as school. They feel obligated to follow what they are told in the rules that are set. Strain theory would show that when individuals experience a conflict of sorts between expectations and reality, their behavior varies to adapt, which can range from unquestioned compliance to open revolt. When students comply with fake authority, for example, our Deviant Act in the library, by handing over their ID without questioning who you are or why you're asking, they're displaying normative conformity. They're not necessarily convinced you have the right to check their ID, but they go along to avoid conflict, embarrassment, or even standing out. This reflects how people follow social norms simply because everyone is doing it or because they believe that someone in a position of power should be obeyed. The library is also a formal academic space, so students might already be in the mindset where they're more likely to obey rules and not question authority. Now imagine how this moment might be different for certain students. Say those who are feeling burned out, stressed about grades, or already disillusioned with the system. According to Merton's strain theory, if they've already entered a mode like ritualism, they might comply without resistance, not because they believe in the system, but because they're just used to following rules mindlessly. On the flip side, someone in an innovative mode might question you or even lie saying they forgot their ID to sidestep the rule without outright rejecting the system. Although somebody in a rebellion mode might directly challenge your authority, asking who gave you the right to check their ID or even reporting you in the end. This can be related to our articles as well as Rowland and Jenkins' 2019 study on graduate students' conformity pressure, which shows how obedience can be influenced by surrounding peers by perceived expectations. Overall, most students nowadays will conform to whatever they're being asked just out of fear of being judged or don't want to be scrutinized. And in our experiment with our IDs, all the students complied because other students were around watching and they didn't want to go out of the norm because they saw others handing over the ID, so they just followed the leader.
The results of the study reach far beyond the academic discussion of deviance and conformity. We're currently in a time where campus security and personal safety are major concerns, and our findings accentuate the need for awareness and conformity resistance. It leads all the way back to the classroom. This generation is one of the worst when it comes to conformity, and maybe even generations behind us as well, knowing that we were always taught that our authoritative figures were never questioned. We always followed their directions. We never questioned who they were, whether it were our teachers, our custodians, our principals. We've never had to question our authority, which has its downsides as we come to a college campus. All of us nowadays are aware of the phone call scams, the internet scams, the people that are emailing us wanting our personal information. But now people are starting to show up in more obvious places that we consider normal, such as a library or a college campus, which is why this is so important. The willingness that the students had to hand out their personal identification suggests that there is a deficit in skepticism nowadays. It may be because that's how we were raised. That may be because we were always taught to appreciate our authority figures or anything of the sort. But there are people showing up in more normal places that have the intentions of doing the same things that those hackers online are doing, which is stealing your identity, exploiting certain things, and creating more harmful situations. This is where our act of deviance in the library turned from something that was supposed to be playful and approve of a deviant act to something that is more concerning that needs to be brought to more awareness here on Texas A&M's campus.